Hello and welcome to How to Econ. We will talk about externalities today. First of all, I will go over the definition of externalities. Then we will focus on negative externalities topics such as command and control regulation, market-oriented environmental tools, the benefits and costs of US environmental laws, international environmental issues, and at the end of the video, I will quickly go over positive externalities, public goods, and common resources. Now, private markets offer an efficient way to put buyers and sellers together and determine what goods they produce, how they produce them, and who gets them. The principle that voluntary exchange benefits both buyers and sellers is the fundamental building block of the economic way of thinking. However, what happens when a voluntary exchange affects a third party who is neither the buyer nor the seller? As an example, consider a concert producer who wants to build an outdoor arena that will host country music concerts next to your neighborhood. You will be able to hear these outdoor concerts while sitting in your house, but you have no voice in their construction. The effect of a market exchange on a third party who is outside or external to the exchange is called an externality. Because externalities that occur in market transactions affect other parties beyond those involved, they are sometimes called spillovers. Externalities can be negative or positive. If you hate country music, then having it waft into your house every night would be a negative externality. If you love country music, then what amounts to a series of free concerts would be a positive externality. Pollution is a negative externality. Economists illustrate the social cost of production with a demand and supply diagram. The social cost includes the private cost of production that a company incurs and the external cost of pollution that pass on to society. The figure on the screen here shows the demand and supply for manufacturing refrigerators. The demand curve shows the quantity demanded at each price. The supply curve shows the quantity of refrigerators that all firms in the industry supply at each price, assuming they are taking only their private costs into account, and they are allowed to emit pollution at zero cost. The market equilibrium E0, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, is at the price of $650 per refrigerator and a quantity of 45,000 refrigerators. However, as a byproduct of the metals, plastics, chemicals, and energy that refrigerator manufacturers use, some pollution is created. Let's say that if these pollutants were emitted into the air and water, they could create costs of $100 per refrigerator produced. This cost might occur because of adverse effects on human health, property values, or wildlife habitat, reduction of recreation possibilities, or because of other negative impacts. In a market with no anti-pollution restrictions, firms can dispose of certain waste absolutely free. Now imagine that firms which produce refrigerators must factor in this external cost of pollution. That is, the firms have to consider not only labor and material costs, but also the broader cost to society of harm to health and other costs caused by pollution. If the firm is required to pay $100 for the additional external cost of pollution each time it produces a refrigerator, production becomes more costly and the entire supply curve shifts up by $100. The firm will need to receive a price of $700 per refrigerator and produce a quantity of 40,000 refrigerators. And the firm's new supply curve will be the S-social curve. The new equilibrium will occur at E1. In short, taking the additional external cost of pollution into account results in a higher price, a lower quantity of production, and a lower quantity of pollution. When the externality of pollution exists, the supply curve no longer represents all social costs. Because externalities represent a case where markets no longer consider all social costs, but only some of them, economists commonly refer to externalities as an example of market failure. When there is market failure, the market fails to achieve efficient output because either firms do not account for all costs incurred in the production of output, or consumers do not account for all benefits obtained in the case of a positive externality. In the case of pollution, at the market output, social costs of production exceed social benefits to consumers, and the market produces too much of the product. Now, we will explore how governments require firms to account for the social costs of pollution. When the United States started passing comprehensive environmental laws in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a typical law specified to companies how much pollution their smokestacks or drain pipes could emit and imposed penalties if companies exceed the limit. Other laws require that companies install certain equipment, for example on automobile tailpipes or on smokestacks, to reduce pollution. These types of laws, which specify allowable quantities of pollution and which also may detail which pollution control technologies companies must use, fall under the category of command and control regulation. In effect, command and control regulation requires that firms increase their costs by installing anti-pollution equipment. Thus, firms are required to account for the social cost of pollution in deciding how much output to produce. Command and control regulation has been highly successful in protecting and cleaning up the United States environment. In 1970, the federal government created Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) to oversee all environmental laws. In the same year, Congress enacted the Clean Air Act to address air pollution. Just 2 years later, in 1972, Congress passed and the President signed the far-reaching Clean Water Act. These command and control environmental laws and their amendments and updates have been largely responsible for America's cleaner air and water in recent decades. However, economists have pointed out three difficulties with command and control environmental regulation. First, command and control regulation offers no incentive to improve the quality of the environment beyond the standard set by a particular law. Once firms meet the standard, polluters have zero incentive to do better. Second, command and control regulation is inflexible. It usually requires the same standard for all polluters and often the same pollution control technology as well. This means that command and control regulation draws no distinctions between firms that would find it easy and inexpensive to meet the pollution standard or to reduce pollution even further, and firms that might find it difficult and costly to meet the standard. Firms have no reason to rethink their production methods in fundamental ways that might reduce pollution even more and at a lower cost. Third, legislators and EPA analysts write the command and control regulations, and so they are subject to compromises in the political process. Existing firms often argue and lobby that stricter environmental standards should not apply to them, only to new firms that wish to start production. Consequently, real-world environmental laws are full of fine print, loopholes, and exceptions. Although critics accept the goal of reducing pollution, they question whether command and control regulation is the best way to design policy tools for accomplishing that goal. A different approach is the use of market-oriented tools, which I will talk about next. Market-oriented environmental policies create incentives to allow firms some flexibility in reducing pollution. The three main categories of market-oriented approaches to pollution control are pollution charges, marketable permits, and better defined property rights. A pollution charge or Pigovian tax is a tax imposed on the quantity of pollution that a firm emits. It is named after the English economist Arthur Pigot, who studied the concept of economic externalities. A pollution charge gives a profit-maximizing firm an incentive to determine ways to reduce its emissions as long as the marginal cost of reducing the emissions is less than the tax. The figure on the screen illustrates the marginal cost that a firm faces in reducing pollution. The marginal cost of pollution reduction, like most marginal cost curves, increase with output, at least in the short run. Reducing the first 10 pounds of particulate emissions cost the firms $300 in this case. Reducing the second 10 pounds would cost $500. Reducing the third 10 pounds would cost $900. Reducing the fourth 10 pounds would cost $1,500. And the fifth 10 pounds would cost $2,500. This pattern for the cost of reducing pollution is common because the firm can use the cheapest and easiest method to make initial reductions in pollution, but additional reductions in pollution become more expensive. Imagine the firm now faces a pollution tax of $1,000 for every 10 pounds of particulates it emits. The firm has the choice of either polluting and paying the tax, or reducing the amount of particulates it emits and paying the cost of abatement, as the figure shows. How much will the firm pollute and how much will the firm abate? The first 10 pounds would cost the firm $300 to abate. This is substantially less than the $1,000 tax, so the firm will choose to abate. The second 10 pounds would cost $500 to abate, which is still less than the tax, so it will choose to abate. The third 10 pounds would cost $900 to abate, which is slightly less than the $1,000 tax. The fourth 10 pounds would cost $1,500, which is much more costly than paying the tax. As a result, the firm will reduce pollutants by 30 pounds because the marginal cost of reducing pollution by this amount is less than the pollution tax. With a tax of $1,000, the firm has no incentive to reduce pollution more than 30 pounds. A firm that has to pay a pollution tax will have an incentive to figure out the least expensive technologies for reducing pollution. Firms that can reduce pollution cheaply and easily will do so to minimize their pollution taxes, whereas firms that will incur higher costs for reducing pollution will end up paying the pollution tax instead. Compared with command and control regulation, a pollution tax reduces pollution in a more flexible and cost-effective way. The second approach to pollution control is marketable permit programs. A marketable permit program gives firms permits to emit a certain amount of pollution. Firms with more permits than its pollution level can sell the remaining permits to other firms. The total quantity of pollution will decline. However, buying and selling the marketable permits will determine exactly which firms reduce pollution and by how much. With a system of marketable permits, the firms that find it least expensive to do so will reduce pollution the most. If the amount of pollution allowed by a given permit declined with time, it is called the shrinkable type. The third approach to pollution control is to define property rights better. Property rights are the legal rights of ownership on which others are not allowed to infringe without paying compensation. Named after the economist Ronald Coase, the Coase theorem says that if property rights are clearly defined and private parties can bargain easily over the allocation of resources, they can solve the externality problem on their own. However, private solutions do not always work. There are three reasons for that. First, it is the high transaction cost. They are the costs parties incur in the process of agreeing to and following through on a bargain. Second, even if a beneficial agreement is possible, each party may hold out for a better deal. Third, if the number of parties is very large, coordinating them might be costly and difficult. Now, let's take a look at a numerical example about two approaches to pollution control. There are two companies, Acme and US Electric or USC, running coal-burning power plants. Each emits 40 tons of sulfur dioxide or SO2 per month. The total emission is 80 tons of sulfur dioxide per month. The government's goal is to reduce sulfur dioxide emissions by 25% from 80 tons to 60 tons per month. The cost of reducing emissions are $100 per ton for Acme and $200 per ton for USC. The first policy option is command and control or regulation that requires each firm to cut its emissions by 25% or 10 tons of sulfur dioxide. Let's compute the cost to each firm and the total cost of achieving the environmental goal using this policy. Because the cost of reducing 1 ton of sulfur dioxide is $100 for Acme, to reduce 10 tons of sulfur dioxide, it will cost Acme $1,000. Because the cost of reducing 1 ton of sulfur dioxide is $200 for USE, it will cost USE $2,000 to reduce 10 tons. So the total cost of achieving the environmental goal is $3,000. Now, let's take a look at the second approach, the marketable permit program. Assume that the government issues 60 permits, each allows 1 ton of sulfur dioxide emissions. The government gives 30 permits to each firm and allows permit trading between two firms. Each firm may use all of its permits to emit 30 tons of sulfur dioxide, or it may emit less than 30 tons and sell leftover permits, or it may purchase extra permits to emit more than 30 tons. Let's compute the total cost of achieving the environmental goal, which is to reduce the total sulfur dioxide emission by 25% when Acme uses 20 permits and sells 10 permits to USE at the price of $150 each. Let's look at Acme first. Acme uses 20 permits to emit 20 tons of sulfur dioxide. Recall that Acme used to emit 40 tons of sulfur dioxide. This means Acme has to reduce 20 tons of sulfur dioxide. This would cost Acme $2,000 because it takes Acme $100 to reduce 1 ton of sulfur dioxide. Acme was given 30 permits. It used 20 permits and it sold 10 extra permits to USE at the price of $150 each. That means it receives $1,500 revenue from USE. Given its $2,000 cost to reduce 20 tons of sulfur dioxide emissions, Acme's net cost is $2,000 minus $1,500, which is $500. Now, let's look at USE's cost. USE bought 10 permits from Acme, so that was $1,500 totally. Now it has 40 permits, which includes 30 permits from the government and 10 permits from Acme. With 40 permits, USE can emit 40 tons of sulfur dioxide emissions. That means it does not have to reduce any emissions. So the net cost to USE is just the $1,500 that it paid to Acme. So the total cost of achieving the environmental goal of reducing the sulfur dioxide emissions by 25% is $500 net cost for Acme plus $1,500 net cost for USE equals $2,000. In conclusion, using tradable permit program where Acme with lower abatement cost reduces its pollution level and sells its extra permits to USE who has higher abatement cost, the goal is achieved at a lower total cost and lower cost to each firm than using command and control regulation. No matter which approach that our government and businesses take, overall, billions of dollars are spent every year to comply with the environmental laws and protect the environment. There are benefits associated with a cleaner environment, such as people may stay healthier and live longer, certain industries that rely on clean air and water may benefit, property values may be higher, and people may simply enjoy a cleaner environment. However, reducing pollution is costly because resources must be sacrificed. We can use the tools of marginal analysis to illustrate the marginal cost and the marginal benefits of reducing pollution. Remember that the marginal cost of reducing pollution are generally increasing because one can make the least expensive and easiest reductions, leaving the more expensive methods for later. The marginal benefits of reducing pollution are generally declining because one can take the steps that provide the greatest benefit first, and steps that provide less benefit can wait until later. This graph illustrates a theoretical model of this situation. When the quantity of environmental protection is low, so that pollution is extensive. For example, at the quantity level QA, there are usually numerous relatively cheap and easy ways to reduce pollution, and the marginal benefits of doing so are quite high. At the quantity level QA, it makes sense to allocate more resources to fight pollution. However, as the extent of environmental protection increases, the cheap and easy ways of reducing pollution begin to decrease, and one must use more costly methods. The marginal cost curve rises. Also, as environmental protection increases, one achieves the largest marginal benefits first, followed by reduced marginal benefits. As the quantity of environmental protection increases to, say, QB, the gap between marginal benefits and marginal cost narrows. At point QC, the marginal cost will exceed the marginal benefits. At this level of environmental protection, society is not allocating resources efficiently because it is forfeiting too many resources to reduce pollution. Many countries around the world have become more aware of the benefits of environmental protection. Yet, even if most nations individually took steps to address their environmental issues, no nation acting alone can solve certain environmental problems which spill over national borders. No nation by itself can reduce emissions of carbon dioxide and other gases by enough to solve the problem of global warming, not without the cooperation of other nations. Another issue is the challenge of preserving biodiversity, which includes the full spectrum of animals and plant genetic material. Although a nation can protect biodiversity within its own borders, no nation acting alone can protect biodiversity around the world. Global warming and biodiversity are examples of international externalities. The Paris Climate Agreement passed in 2016 with more than 100 participating countries committed to significantly reduce carbon dioxide emissions. However, the practical details of an international system and how it would operate across international borders are complex. It seems unlikely that some form of world government will or can impose a detailed system of environmental command and control regulations around the world. As a result, a decentralized and market-oriented approach may be the only practical way to address international issues such as global warming and biodiversity. So far, we have been looking at negative externalities, which are the negative impact that an action or a market exchange has on bystanders. Let's take a look at positive externalities or external benefits, which are positive effects of an action or a market transaction on bystanders. These external benefits are different with the private ones, which are the benefits a person who consumes a good or service receives, or a new product's benefits that the company captures. We have social benefits equal private benefits plus external benefits. For example, when a firm invests in new technology, the private benefits or profits that the firm receives are only a portion of the overall social benefits. The social benefits of an innovation account for the value of all the positive externalities of the new idea or product, whether enjoyed by other companies or society as a whole, as well as the private benefits the firm that deployed the new technology receives. There are plenty of other examples of positive externalities, such as vaccinations against disease are not only a protection for the individual, but they have the positive spillover of protecting others who may become infected. Or when a number of homes in a neighborhood are modernized, updated, and restored, not only does it increase the home's value, but other property values in the neighborhood may increase as well. The appropriate public policy response to a positive externality is to help the party creating the positive externality receive a greater share of the social benefits. In the case of vaccines, like flu shots, an effective policy might be to provide a subsidy to those who choose to get vaccinated. This graph shows the market for flu shots. The market demand curve D market for flu shots reflects only the marginal private benefits MPB that the vaccinated individuals receive from the shots. Assuming that there are no spillover costs in the production of flu shots, the market supply curve is given by the marginal private cost MPC of producing the vaccinations. The equilibrium quantity of flu shots produced in the market where MPB is equal to MPC is Q market, and the price of flu shots is P market. However, spillover effects exist in this market because others, those who choose not to purchase a flu shot, receive a positive externality in a reduced chance of contracting the flu. When we add the spillover benefits to the marginal private benefit of flu shots, the marginal social benefit MSB of flu shots is given by the social curve. Because the MSB is greater than MPB, we see that the socially optimal level of flu shots is greater than the market quantity. Q social exceeds Q market, and the corresponding price of flu shots if the market were to produce at the level Q social would be at price social. Unfortunately, the marketplace does not recognize the positive externality and flu shots will go underproduced and underconsumed. How can government try to move the market level of output closer to the socially desirable level of output? One policy could be to produce a subsidy, like a voucher, to any citizen who wishes to get vaccinated. This voucher could act as income as one could use to purchase only a flu shot, and if the voucher was exactly equal to the per unit spillover benefits, would increase market equilibrium to a quantity of Q social and a price of P social, where MSB equals MSC. Suppliers of the flu shots would receive payment of price social per vaccination, while consumers of flu shots would redeem the voucher and only pay a price of P subsidy. When the government uses a subsidy in this way, it produces the socially optimal quantity of vaccination. Back to the example of new technology and their social benefits. In some cases, competition can discourage new technology, especially when other firms can quickly copy a new idea. One way to increase new technology is to guarantee the innovator an exclusive right to that new product or process. Intellectual property rights include patents, which give the inventor the exclusive legal right to make, use, or sell the invention for a limited time, and copyright laws, which give the author an exclusive legal right over works of literature, music, films, videos, and pictures. With a patent, a firm is able to earn monopoly profits on its product for a period of time, which offers an incentive for research and development. While patents provide an incentive to innovate by protecting the innovator, they are not perfect. For example, in a fast-moving, high-technology industry like biotechnology or semiconductor design, patents might be almost irrelevant because technology is advancing so quickly. Or not every new idea can be protected with a patent or a copyright. For example, a new way of organizing a factory or a new way of training employees. Patents may sometimes cover too much or be granted too easily. The 21-year time period for a patent is somewhat arbitrary. Ideally, a patent should cover a long enough period of time for the inventor to earn a good return, but not so long that it allows the inventor to charge a monopoly price permanently. Because patents are imperfect and do not apply well to all situations, alternative methods of improving the rate of return for inventors of new technology are desirable. If the private sector does not have sufficient incentive to carry out research and development, one possibility is for the government to fund such work directly through partnerships and grants for innovative projects. A complementary approach to support R&D that does not involve the government's close scrutiny of specific projects is to give firms a reduction in taxes depending on how much research and development they do. The federal government refers to this policy as the Research and Experimentation R&E tax credit. Positive externalities and public goods are closely related concepts. Public goods have positive externalities like police protection or public health funding. Public goods have two defining characteristics. They are non-excludable and non-rival. The first characteristic, that a public good is non-excludable, means that it is costly or impossible to exclude someone from using the good. For instance, if Larry buys a private good like a piece of pizza, then he can exclude other people from eating that pizza. However, if national defense is provided, then it includes everyone. Even if you strongly disagree with America's defense policy or with the level of defense spending, the national defense still protects you. You cannot choose to be unprotected, and national defense cannot protect everyone else and exclude you. The second main characteristic of a public good, that it is non-rival, means that when one person uses the public good, another can also use it. With a private good like pizza, if Max is eating the pizza, then Michelle cannot also eat it. That is, the two people are rivals in consumption. With a public good like national defense, Max's consumption of national defense does not reduce the amount left for Michelle, so they are non-rival in this area. Private companies find it difficult to produce public goods. If a good or service is non-excludable, like national defense, so that it is impossible or very costly to exclude people from using this good or service, then how can a firm charge people for it? Free rider problem can arise here. It is a situation in which people have an incentive to let others pay for the public good and then to free ride on the purchases of others. The key insight in paying for public goods is to find a way of assuring that everyone will make a contribution and to prevent free riders. For example, if people come together through the political process and agree to pay taxes and make group decisions about the quantity of public goods, they can defeat the free rider problem by requiring through the law that everyone contributes. Government spending and taxes are not the only way to provide public goods. In some cases, markets can produce public goods. Think about radio. It is non-excludable since once the radio signal is broadcast, it could be very difficult to stop someone from receiving it. It is non-rival since one person listening to the signal does not prevent others from listening as well. Because of these features, it is practically impossible to charge listeners directly for listening to conventional radio broadcasts. Radio has found a way to collect revenue by selling advertising, which is an indirect way of charging listeners by taking up some of their time. In a more recent development, satellite radio companies such as SiriusXM charge a regular subscription fee for streaming music without commercials. In this case, however, the product is excludable. Only those who pay for the subscription will receive the broadcast. Some public goods will also have a mixture of public provision at no charge along with fees for some purposes, like a public city park that is free to use, but the government charges a fee for parking your car, for reserving certain picnic grounds, and for food sold at a refreshment stand. In other cases, we can use social pressures and personal appeals rather than the force of law to reduce the number of free riders and to collect resources for the public good. For example, neighbors sometimes form an association to carry out beautification projects or to patrol the area after dark to discourage crime. In low-income countries where social pressure strongly encourages all farmers to participate, farmers in a region may come together to work on a large irrigation project that will benefit all. There are some goods that do not fall neatly into the categories of private good or public good. While it is easy to classify a pizza as a private good and a city park as a public good, what about an item that is non-excludable and rivalrous, such as the queen conch? In the Caribbean, the queen conch is a large marine mollusk that lives in shallow waters of seagrass. These waters are so shallow and so clear that a single diver may harvest many conch in a single day. Not only is conch meat a local delicacy and an important part of the local diet, but artists use the large ornate shells and craftsmen transform them. Because almost anyone with a small boat, snorkel, and mask can participate in the conch harvest, it is essentially non-excludable. At the same time, fishing for conch is rivalrous. Once a diver catches one conch, another diver cannot catch it. We call goods that are non-excludable and rivalrous common resources. Because the waters of the Caribbean are open to all conch fishermen, and because any conch that you catch is a conch that I cannot catch, fishermen tend to over-harvest common resources like the conch, fish, timber, or non-renewable resources. The problem of over-harvesting common resources is called tragedy of the commons. To address the issue of over-harvesting conch and other marine fisheries, economists typically advocate simple devices like fishing licenses, harvesting limits, and shorter fishing seasons. That's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time.